Степан Бандера – герой для какого-то процента украинцев. И это нормально, и это классно. Это один из тех людей, который защищал свободу Украины. Да. Степан
Bandera is following Euromaidan. Parts of the country broke away, but even before that, it was a divided country. And nothing exemplified that more than the relationship with Bandera. Surveys in the West would show a majority there holding a positive opinion of the man born on the 1st of January 1909. But in the south and east of Ukraine, as it was, positive opinion would typically be 1%, even lower. Details of this below, by the way. But when I lived in Ukraine 2011 to early 2013, Bandera, as I say, born 1st of January 1909, died 15th of October 1959, we'll come to that, was a sleeping Bandera, not a part of everyday life, almost a forgotten man. And then late 2013 came Maidan, and Maidan made a poster boy of Bandera. Now, Bandera is one of the symbols of post-Maidan Ukraine, with the march honouring his birthday going from a few ultra-nationals in the west of the country pre-Maidan to this, post, the centre of Kiev. So who was Stephan Bandera in the most succinct definition possible? Well, to some, he's a Ukrainian hero, and to others, a reviled Nazi.
The opinion of the majority of political analysts, Bandera and his motto can be classified as fascists, actively cooperating in the conduct of the Holocaust.
Here we see Bandera's statue in modern-day Lviv, to give him his full name, Stephan Andreevich Bandera.
Stephan Bandera was born on the 1st of January in 1909 in the village of Stary Uhrinev in the western region of Ukraine known as Galiciana, during which time was a territory of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Stepan came from a large, reputable family with educated parents. His father, Andriy, also served as a priest after having received a degree in theology from Lviv University. The Bandera family belonged to the Ukrainian intelligentsia and were often visited by educated people and public figures with very clear political affiliations. Their household was imbued with the spirit of Ukrainian patriotism, a deeply rooted love for Ukraine, and the desire to fight to the end for her freedom.
Politicised from an early age, Bandera rose from activist to chief propaganda officer of the OUN, Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, by 1931, active in recruiting Ukrainian nationalists in both western and eastern Ukraine even. By 1932, he was second in command of the OUN in Galicia, the name of the region at that time, and 1933 saw him as head of the OUN. In his mid-20s at this time, Bandera, a young man, his politics, though long set. In fact, along with other Ukrainian ultra-nationalists, Roman Shukevich, Stepan Lankevsky, Yaroslav Stetsko, Yaroslav Staruka, as the most prominent members, Bandera was key in developing the concept of permanent revolution in Ukraine. Now, this took the premise that Ukrainian people would always be exploited by an occupier. Revolution would then be required to overthrow that system, and then another revolution once the inevitable exploitation began once again, and so it goes on and on. So after becoming head of the OUN in 1933, Bandera set about trying to convert people to his cause and also driving out those undesirables to him, Poles, Jews and Soviets from the, at that time, disputed territory of Galicia. Now, this policy failed to have his desired effect in obtaining autonomy for the region, so Bandera then turned to terrorism. Although in actual fact, Bandera's political career had always been a vehicle in which he was travelling to an inevitable destination: terrorism. The OUN, accusing the Polish government of authorising a policy of pacification against the minority Ukrainian population, hatched a plan to assassinate Bronislaw Piraki. Piraki was Poland's interior minister, the top politician of the interwar period. For his part in the assassination, which took place in Warsaw on the 15th of June 1934, Bandera was convicted of terrorism and sentenced to death. That then commuted to life imprisonment. Bandera was held at the Wronki prison in Poland, but when the Nazis invaded Poland, Bandera was freed in September 1939 after pledging his allegiance to the Nazis. However, Bandera failed to regain overall control of the OUN, disagreeing with then leader Andrei Melnik, who opposed Bandera's plan to integrate the OUN fully into Nazi German forces. And so it was the OUN split into two factions. Bandera's was the OUN-B, and Bandera set about forming Ukrainian battalions which would be part of Nazi Germany's military machine. In early 1941, the Naktagor unit was formed under Bandera. This Ukrainian unit was outfitted in the standard Nazi Wehrmacht uniforms, placing blue and yellow ribbons on their shoulders. The aims were outlined as follows: Moskali, that's a derogatory term for Russians, Poles and Jews that are hostile to us are to be destroyed in struggle, particularly those opposing the regime, by means of deporting them to their own lands, eradicating their intelligentsia, which is not to be admitted to any governmental positions, and overall preventing any creation of this intelligentsia, e.g. access to education, etc. Jews are to be isolated, removed from governmental positions in order to prevent sabotage. Those who deem necessary may only work under strict supervision and removed from their positions for slightest misconduct. Jewish assimilation is not possible. The role of the Ukrainian Nazi battalions, there was also, of course, notably Roland, was also to ensure the civilian population were ready for what was, by early 1941, the imminent Nazi invasion. And so it was that while other parts of Ukraine offered resistance and struggle against the Nazi invasion, the west of Ukraine openly, enthusiastically greeted the Nazis. Civilians even marching, performing the Nazi Sieg Heil salute. So these scenes of Nazi collaborating Ukrainians are not so far removed from what we see today in Ukraine. Actually, I was at that Bandera march myself taking photos there. These are my photos, and it was that which made me realise that at the start of 2013, Ukraine was falling into ultranationalism, something which would fuel Euromaidan at the end of 2013. Bandera's prominence during Maidan and after in post-Maidan Ukraine has had even Western experts sympathetic to Ukraine unable to defend the country on this point.
What is your opinion about using by Kiev's government fascistic symbolic, like using of swastiks, flags, building the Bandera statues? What do you think about returning of these authentic Hitler symbols in Europe, which has so sad experience with it?
Okay, so loaded question. So on the issue of Bandera and Shushkevich, what I think about that is published and has been for a long time. One of the first things I wrote about as a scholar was Ukrainian nationalism, and in particular the mass murder of ethnic Poles in Volhynia in 1943, when the previous Ukrainian regime made Bandera and Shushkevich heroes of Ukraine. Ukraine. I wrote an article criticizing that and mocking it on all possible grounds, and I referred to the two of them as fascists, which is what I believe. I don't think that Ukraine should be founding its tradition on these people.
As well as collaborating with the Nazis, Bandera had his own agenda: the complete elimination of the Jewish and Polish populations from the west of Ukraine. On June the 30th, with Nazi invasion imminent from Lvov, Bandera declared an independent Ukrainian state, stating it would work closely with the Nazis to form the new order in Europe. This declaration was immediately followed by the beginning of the Lvov pogroms, the mass extermination of Jews and Poles, which took place from the 30th of June to the 2nd of July 1941, murdering a number estimated as high as in the tens of thousands. Men were beaten and killed, women were raped and killed. As would also be the case in later OUN massacres, there were many instances of mutilation. Bandera's Naktagor battalion and Bandera himself took the lead in the Lvov pogroms, with reports of them using such brutality in the massacre, including smashing victims to death with hammers and spades, that the Nazis themselves were shocked. There are some photos simply too disturbing to put in a video on YouTube. I'll put a link below with details. Bandera's independent Ukrainian state lasted less than a week. Bandera had been duped into believing by the Nazis that they'd allow him to have his independent Ukrainian state, when all they wanted, of course, was compliance from the Ukrainians as they invaded Ukraine. Bandera himself was arrested on July the 5th, 1941, and sent to prison in Germany. We can hear more about that here.
As soon as we asked about Bandera's collaboration with Hitler, the teacher interfered at once. Bandera was always against cooperation with Hitler. Bandera has told Hitler that Ukraine should be independent. Hitler ordered to kill everyone, and Bandera opposed it. That is why he was imprisoned in a prison camp in Sachsenhausen, and he was there until 1944. It is true that Bandera spent some of his time as a prisoner in Sachsenhausen, because his people has appealed to Germany for a free Ukraine, and this was too much for the Nazis. Bandera, however, was not imprisoned in a simple jail cell, but inside a building designed for special convicts. Nazis find Bandera to be a useful tool for them, and he would serve their interest. There are two places where Bandera could have been imprisoned. Either he was in this building, which until now still exists, fit for a person with a family, or he is in the ward 51, 52, and 53, but the walls were removed between them so that it would be more comfortable compared to an ordinary prison. He was imprisoned here, in one of these wards, and it was strange for someone to be released from the Nazi prison camp. Bandera was freed by the Nazis in 1944 because he again agreed with the Nazis to fight against the Soviet Union. He held negotiations with the Ukrainian nationalists to collaborate with the Germans, and they agreed.
By the time Bandera was released, Nazi Germany was literally fighting a losing war, and despite Bandera's efforts, many of the OUN had changed sides, now fighting for the Red Army, or at least with the Red Army, against the Nazis, not to be turned back. Now this is now part of the Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian narrative that the OUN, Bandera, fought against both sides for a free Ukraine. The reality was that they fought with the Nazis until it was abundantly clear that the Nazis were facing a heavy defeat, and they then switched sides to try to save themselves. As for Bandera's family, his brothers Alexander and Vasil were arrested by the Germans and interned in Auschwitz, while the Ukrainian side offered their death there, and they were both killed in Auschwitz, as another reason why Bandera, this is Stephan Bandera, wouldn't have collaborated with the Nazis. More reports put Stephan Bandera's brothers as being killed there by Polish inmates as revenge for Bandera, their brothers' actions. Bandera's father, Andrei, was arrested by the Soviets in May of 1941, sent to Kiev, where he was executed for his OUN insurgent actions. Bandera's sisters, also in the first part of 1941, were arrested and sent to a Siberian gulag. They were released in 1960. Bandera's efforts for the Nazis after his release from his office in Berlin, he didn't return to Ukraine, failed to have any real effect on the remaining Nazi war effort, with Nazi defeat already inevitable by that time. As the Allied forces advanced on Berlin in 1945, notably, of course, the Soviet Red Army, Bandera fled. Bandera would settle with his family in West Germany, Munich, remaining the leader of the OUN-B and working with several anti-communist organisations, as well as with British intelligence agencies, giving spy training. In Krakow in 1940, Bandera had met Yaroslava, also a Ukrainian ultranationalist activist. Married in June of 1940, the couple had 3 children. The 1950s saw the family living in Munich. Now, post-war, Bandera escaped any repercussions for his collaboration with the Nazis, at least from the West. But the Soviets hadn't forgotten him. By 1959, the warning level to Bandera had reached critical, with German police even arresting a man who'd been questioning his children. But Bandera didn't take the threat seriously, refusing not only to leave Munich, but even to move from the apartment he lived in the centre of the city. On October the 15th, 1959, Bandera was killed. He was killed by KGB assassin Bogdan Stashinsky, who'd been watching him since January, but intensely observing the 50-year-old for several days. Despite this attention, the Stashinsky's description of Bandera, short, bald and blue-eyed, Bandera, living under his name of Stepan Popel, had let his bodyguards off that day. Stashinsky produced his cyanide gun from inside a rolled-up newspaper. Bandera's last words were, "What are you doing here?" In reply, he was shot in the face. At just after 1 p.m, Bandera was found by the entrance to his home, which we see here today, 7 Kreitmeyer Street, dying. And he died of cyanide potassium poisoning just minutes later. In a twist of irony, Bandera's assassin was from the same part of Ukraine as he was, not far from Lvov. Bogdan Stashinsky's family had even been supporters of Bandera's OUN. But by 1959, Stashinsky was in the service of the KGB, tasked with the taking out of Bandera, a task he fulfilled. But Bandera's name lives on from beyond his Munich grave. And by the way, that Bandera grave in Munich, regularly bedecked with Nazi symbols, in direct contravention of German law, but that's another subject. Bandera was made a hero of Ukraine in January of 2010, an act of provocation by then Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko, whose disastrous tenure as president ended in February. The Hero of Ukraine award to Bandera was annulled a year later, on January the 12th, 2011. President at this time was Viktor Yanukovych. But although stripped of the Hero of Ukraine, Bandera never really went away. He was just sent to the west of Ukraine with their Bandera stalls, Bandera restaurant. Then Maidan, and Bandera was back. And as for Bandera, the most popular question in relation to him is, was he a hero or a Nazi?
Well, this newest statement of Mr. Melnik is awkward, of course, for the government of Mr. Zelensky, for the Kiev, governmental regime, because he's just admitting his respect and so on for war criminals, for mass murderers, Stephan Bandera, Shushkevich and other people. But it's not a coming out of fascist or neo-fascist. It has been the line of the government of Kiev to respect those people, to rename stadiums, factories, streets in those names of those people, honoring those people. So this is just the line, but it was awkward, of course, for him to have a real journalist asking him, or an honest one, not those mainstream puppets, or I don't know how to put it. I think this is a sign of changed attitude from the mainstream, from the strong governments of the West, which have been supporting Kiev still, and that they are distancing them now from
als Botschafter das Bandera-Grab besucht. Hast du gesagt, du verehrst ihn. Fangen wir damit an. Seit wann verehrst du Stephan Bandera? Warum?
Nein, ich habe nicht gesagt, dass ich ihn verehre.
Doch, mehrfach.
Ich habe ihn, also ich habe das Grab besucht, weil Stephan Bandera jemand ist, und zwar nicht nur also für mich persönlich, aber für viele Ukrainer, eben als Inbegriff des Freiheitskämpfers, also für die Unabhängigkeit der Ukraine. Und da ist es so, dass natürlich ein Freiheitskämpfer, da gibt es keine Gesetze, also für diejenigen, die für die Freiheit kämpfen. Also ich meine, Robin Hood wird ja von allen verehrt, aber auch er hat ja nicht quasi laut dem Recht gehandelt, das damals gültig war.
Stimmt. Du sagst doch, du widersprichst ja auch nicht, dass er Antisemit war.
Nein, also
du erkennst doch auch an, dass er...
Ich kenne keine Äußerung von ihm persönlich.
Dass er mit seinen Leuten an der Ermordung von 800.000 Juden beteiligt war. Das erkennst du ja auch an.
Nein. Also er war nicht beteiligt.
Das waren aber seine Truppen. Seine Truppen haben... Das ist doch zweifellos.
Ich meine, du sagst zweifellos, aber es gibt keine Beweise. Also er wurde nicht verurteilt.
Es gibt keine Beweise, dass er selbst einen Juden umgebracht hat, das stimmt, aber seine Leute... Er hat das befehligt. Er hat befehligt, 100.000 Zivilisten...
Er hat keinen Befehl gegeben. Er hat keinen Befehl gegeben, Juden zu vernichten. Und deswegen, dazu stehe ich. Und deswegen...
Ich habe dir doch gerade vorgelesen, was sein Programm war. Die Juden waren die größten Feinde von ihm. Selbst noch vor Russen und Polen und Deutschen. Das bezweifelst du?
Ich bezweifle, dass er Befehle gegeben, Juden zu töten.
Flugblätter, als die Deutschen reingekommen sind nach Lviv. Da hieß es, Volk, das musst du wissen. Moskowiten, Polen, Ungarn und Juden, sie sind deine Feinde, vernichte sie. Das musst du wissen. Deine Führung, dein Führer Stephan Bandera.
Was für Flugblätter?
Als die Deutschen gerade einmarschiert sind, da haben sie quasi an die Bevölkerung das verteilt, die ja noch unter anderer Herrschaft dann da waren. Die haben sich ja mit den Deutschen verbrüdert. Das ist doch ganz klar.
Also.
Und ich frage mich halt, ich verstehe...
Also ich werde dir heute nicht sagen, dass ich mich davon distanziere. Und das war's. Ja.